When I think about conflict, scarcity, the most dramatic effects of climate change, I often think about the Sahel region. So I thought for this third section for this week, I would focus on specific challenges faced by people who live in the Sahel, an area that stretches from Mauritania in the west to Ethiopia in the east, an area that's seen some of the most dramatic climate change trends of anywhere in the world. Okay, let's see if I can change slides. Right, so it stretches across an entire continent. Um, Millions of people live in this area, and you have quite dramatic challenges for political institutions, for stability, as well as agricultural production. In this week, we've already read articles that have looked at both sides of the continent, and so for this section, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of specific challenges faced by this region, and then end with a couple of videos related to one smaller section straddling the Ethiopian and Kenyan border that is seeing ongoing challenges that relate to the subject matter of the class. So the Sahel, it's the Arabic word Sahel means shore, denotes the transition zone between the Sahara Desert to the north and the plains to the south. It's a semi-arid region. Average rainfall of between 30 and 50 centimeters per year. It's based by climate, and so it doesn't really uh, the definitions of it aren't really set according to international borders, and it covers all or part of those colored countries as well as some neighboring ones as well, depending on the climate. In 2008, the UN's chief advisor Jan Egeland referred to the region in West Africa, Mali, Mauritania, Niger as ground zero for vulnerable communities who are struggling with climate change. I should delete that too. It's gotten 10% bigger since 1920. These are GIFs from the Yale E360 Institute. Let's see if I can get it to work. The other one about Australia wasn't. Oh, that. Oh, I love doing screen recordings. Okay. No, that's not going to work. You can go to the link and you can see the extent to which the Sahel is expanding, as well as the Sahara Desert. Temperatures have risen by nearly 1 degree C since 1970, nearly twice the global rate. 1 degree Celsius. Remember from earlier in this class, I showed you the normal distribution, the curve of temperatures in Canberra. That by shifting that entire curve 1 degree C, you're not just increasing the frequency of nice days, you're increasing the frequency of those extreme days as well. The region faces increasingly variable rainfall, as we've seen is relevant from earlier readings in the semester, more frequent to drought and storms. You have Africa is so big, you see different climate regions. You have areas in which you have lower rainfall and higher, like from that reading from last week, often in countries that are neighboring each other. The population of the region of entire sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to be 920 million in mid-2014. It's estimated to double due to the fertility rate we've talked about in the population week in the next 36 years. And at least 95% of the food production in the Sahel, as with the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, is based on rain-fed agriculture. So that means if the rains don't come, you can't just go ahead and tap the aquifer or the neighboring dam to be able to smooth out your water consumption. And the agricultural sector employs directly or indirectly more than half of the people who live in the region. So the people in the region are really tied to the land, and they don't have those kind of insurance policies, whether it is dependable sources of water, government ability to be able to provide those resources like the French or the US governments have. Most of the people are small scale subsistence farmers. The rainfall in the region is quite variable, and you've seen decreases in the average amount of rainfall since 1970 has increased, right? That area in green on the right of this graph. Temperatures also, unsurprisingly, are increasing. I mentioned the average increase of 1 degree C earlier. That's also apparent around the area. Overall, food security varies quite dramatically in the sub-Saharan African region overall. You see a huge difference between South Africa and Burundi. Botswana, Ghana, Uganda, relatively stable countries of anocratic or democratic systems. We have Sierra Leone, Chad, Niger down towards the bottom. You compare that to other states that have developed food security rankings, and they're more likely to not be in sub-Saharan Africa. So these climate changes, the intermittent rainfall, the increasing temperatures, the expansion of the Sahara Desert, all makes it more difficult for people who depend on the land either to grow products or to grow animals, to be pastoralists. Given those porous borders that I talked about, these people often compete across resources and land across borders. We're going to look at this in the video after the end of this section. I think it's an example of, again, the lack of capacity for governments to be able to provide resources for people as their needs change, as well as competition for resources within the country by different groups, as well as across countries. And like as in Mali with the Montanali Dam, how a dam being constructed in Ethiopia, not the one that you're thinking about, can have quite dramatic environmental effects that can cross borders. I know a couple of you are writing on the Gerd Dam. We're actually going to be looking at the Gibe 3 Dam. So the case study, we're really going to drill down to a specific visceral example of these kind of changes, intersection between national level policy and lower level subsistence and conflict, is around Lake Turkana, which is the world's largest desert lake, spanning the border of Ethiopia and Kenya. It has seen quite dramatic environmental changes over the last couple decades. There's a couple of satellite photos of Lake Turkana in the lower left of this graph, and you see the green areas in the north, those kind of low-lying wetlands, and that how much that area has changed just since 1986. You see a huge change in those kind of productive areas and to 2019. Yale E360, they have done a lot of research and reports on this area, helped kind of fund awareness of these kind of climate changes being faced by people, and they have done research on this area, and kind of the underlying tensions in the area can be attributed to two factors, just to start out with. One is the climate change that shifted the size of the Lake Turkana, and the second is national infrastructure and development projects like the Gibe 3 Dam in Ethiopia. So I know a couple of students are at least referencing or studying the Gerd Dam in northwest Ethiopia on the Blue Nile that flows into Egypt, and the transnational tensions that's caused. This dam example is less creating international tensions, although it hasn't improved relations between Ethiopia and Kenya. But it was an earlier case of an earlier dam that started filling 4 years ago in 2016 that had environmental and cultural impacts that I think are relevant to the subject matter in this class. This Gibe 3 Dam, as you see here with the Google map there, while the Gerd Dam is in more in the northwest region near the Egyptian border. You see this area is there's a World Heritage Site there. Ethiopia is one of the first countries to join UNESCO's World Heritage Site process. A number of different World Heritage places there. One of them is that Omo River area that flows into Lake Turkana. You see Lake Turkana there to the south. You see national parks as well as sugar plantations. This is from a report after the Gibbet 3 dam that's seen the dramatic expansion of sugar plantations that have been made possible by the dam. But this area was considered to be culturally and environmentally important, and the dam has had dramatic effects on both the people and the environment in the area. Last week we talked about the Aral Sea, how Stalin, we keep coming back to these major 20th century leaders and the long-term effects they have on their countries. Aral Sea was considered, right, one of the worst environmental disasters. Gibe 3 Dam has been linked to a fundamental environmental change in that region. The dams are often contentious for the environmental effects that they're going to have on the region and the displacement of people, but this is one of the more dramatic from those people who study the ecological location there, that places it as one of the kind of cornerstones of this competition between urban areas' need for power, right? You have intermittent power outages because of insufficient power. The Gibe 3 dam was supposedly be able to produce 40% of the power needs for Ethiopia, but in order to create the dam, you need to displace people who are actually living there. And once that river flow that people depended on, the seasonal rains and the water flowing into Lake Turkana, when that kind of ebb and flow that had been going on for millennia had shifted, that created effects on the environment and people around the world. Not around the world, or around this specific area. And so there's been a bunch of non-governmental organization efforts at trying to raise awareness, international organizations efforts at trying to not support the creation of this dam. You'll see in the second video where they actually found the external funds to be able to create it, and the way that this is shaped how people will use the land. You see this screenshot from the sugar from that report, from this report, on how since the dam first started being filled, it wasn't really finished until 2016. You see the growth of development, and sugar requires a lot of water, and that's changed how herders and pastoralists are able to live, as we'll see in the video. So I think this is one of those essays, one of those topics that really make you think about levels of analysis and different actors at different levels. That you have local stories of conflicts between pastoralists and farmers that we're going to see in the video in a second, as well as in other kind of reports showing how these national level projects have affected groups at the individual level, and the national level results. The electricity generation has come, but the ability to smooth out those power outages isn't necessarily perfect, and the amount of debt and expense that it's caused, and international opprobrium for the creation of the dam. How do we reconcile the challenges, right? The people on the ground that are affected versus the broader national ability to provide resources for the other millions of people who don't live in that area, right? And this, I want to end by by asking you a couple of questions to think about as you watch the two videos. At the end of the first video by photographer Abramson, there's a call for a regional response to deal with the changes and the scarcity and the tensions between different groups in the region. Given the actors that are involved, their environment and capabilities, what type of regional response do you think is necessary, right? A lot of the issues and challenges that we're going to look at, that we've looked at in this class, and the responses that we're going to look at the end of the class require these huge international organizations or groups, or a global response, right? But then also, as we've seen with collective action, and the reason why I do workshop groups with only a small group of people is because it's easier to have concrete discussions and make decisions when you have a smaller group. And so in international organizations research, there's been more of a focus on understanding regional organizations, regional responses to the needs, that you want to try to devolve the response to people who have a stake in the process, that know the challenges and should theoretically be more able to reach agreements that would hold. So, what kind of regional response do you think is necessary given the challenges that you see in the video? And then the third is to try to get you to look at and see at least one example of a regional response that did happen in the aftermath, in what happened since the publication of the video. You go to a really amazing, I found, resource for trying to find news on places that don't get global coverage in traditional media outlets, ReliefWeb. In the search box, you type, I found there's a lot of probably other ways to get to the same article, but if you type Omo and Turkana, you're going to come up with a series of results. The second should be one from 2019, press release from the UNDP talking about the outcome of a regional effort. So I want you to try to think about what kind of response you might want to or think that they need to organize and then see what actually happened. And you can go more broader than that to see if has anything happened on this topic since 2019. Was this the kind of regional response you were thinking of? Why or why not? Right? To try to get at how you apply this kind of general understanding of pressures for conflict and the way of trying to reconcile mutually competing interests with general theories and actual facts on the ground. Another one, I come from the United States and I may be overly sensitive about or puritanical for these kind of things, but I don't think that many of my videos have foul language. I haven't had any that have had nudity so far. Different areas have different cultural norms. The where the water ends in filming people as they actually live, there's some nudity of both adults and of children. If you want to avoid that, you can watch the second video and answer these two alternate lecture questions, which I think, as a side note, I would be interested to just get your guys' thoughts about, or at least getting you think about with the video. The first one is, what country helped provide critical financing for the Gibe 3 dam project? And can you find, using your own tools, what other funding agencies or organizations did not fund the dam and why, what reasons they might give? And can you think about why one country would be more willing to provide funding than another, and specifically what kind of political institutions they might have? So enjoy the videos. I'll conclude now for the substance. I'm going to be talking about literature reviews and research proposals in the last videos, but I just wanted to conclude with a couple of brief findings from the initial trends, the theory, and from the discussion of the Sahel, tying it back to the motivating question: how are food production and consumption linked to human security and conflict? Overall, the cases and the literature, my conclusions at least, we can talk about this more in the workshop, is that resource disputes relate to a whole bunch of different issues related to water and land. It's not necessarily easy to disentangle last week from this week. Water, land access, how land is used, and when people are displaced, right? The kulaks were displaced as part of the efforts for Stalin to solidify control in the 1930s. People around the Gibe 3 dam were displaced. How much the needs of the state come in tension with the needs of the individual, and how countries reconcile that. Different groups reconcile that in different ways. The overall global food production patterns are changing given climate change. We saw with the Australian map where wheat is grown has changed over time, and in other areas, right, with the expansion of the Sahara Desert, where people can actually raise livestock, has changed as well. Food prices fluctuate domestically and internationally with substantial effect. Food prices fluctuate unless you go to Costco and get their hot dog and Coke deal, but it's a lost leader for them, right? So it doesn't reflect the actual cost of the product. But normally prices fluctuate, and people respond to that by either buying different things or reducing their consumption of specific goods, or trying to lobby for policy that would make things cheaper. And governments in trying to respond to those kind of pressures face tough balancing acts when trying to develop policies about how to use land and how to encourage certain forms of food production, right? Spending on large scale projects to help make agricultural production possible have opportunity costs, right? And different governments have different incentives, different people that they depend on for their support, and you can write some really interesting research papers about how different governments might reach similar conclusions or different conclusions depending on either background factors or short-term political interests. So yeah, that's a case study with the Sahel. I hope you find the two videos interesting, and we'll start trying to connect this to your own research in my discussion of the literature reviews and your research proposals. Thanks. Thanks for your time.